welcome everyone and good morning everyone to this. It's the third and the final of a series of 3 webinars on biodiversity in cooperation together with IUCN Netherlands. And with this series of webinars, we aim to convey a meaningful dialogue on biodiversity between the financial sector and also real-world biodiversity experts, and also as much as possible with all participating in this webinar. And my name is Jacqueline Duiker, and I'm the Senior Manager at Sustainability and Responsible Investment at VBDO. So today, I'd like to look back briefly to the previous 2 webinars. They actually illustrated many things, but one of them was a failure of the market to effectively address and solve the loss of biodiversity. Investors struggle with having an actual mandate to embed biodiversity in investment decisions. And if they do so, then it's not really clear-cut how to measure the biodiversity footprint of investments, let alone how to correctly price biodiversity effects. So lots of challenges that typically illustrate market failure of the private sector. So luckily, we also have a public sector consisting of governments, local governments, European and supranational, and supervisors, also local, European and supranational, like for instance, the NGFS. So today we're going to talk to the public sector, and we will discuss, hopefully without ignoring any elephants in the room, we will discuss what the public sector can or should do to correct this market failure of the private sector regarding biodiversity, and what needs or can be left to the market, in this case, the financial sector. For this, we have 2 excellent speakers representing the public sector this morning. First, you see Joris van Toor. Joris is a policy advisor at the Supervisory Policy Division of the Nederlandse Bank, the Dutch central bank. He studied econometrics and operations research and quantitative finance and actuarial sciences at Tilburg University. Joris also did a PhD research at TIA School for Business and Society. And this year he published the report Indebted to Nature on biodiversity risks for the Dutch financial sector. Then we also have presenting Doné Slangen. Doné is Managing Director Nature at the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality since 2018. And before that, Doné was Managing Director at Spatial and Water Management at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. Doné studied economic geography at Utrecht University. And finally, as always, we're fortunate that Romy Goedeke will wrap up and close the webinar, in spite, I think, of her present struggle with headaches and cold. And so we appreciate also very much that you will do it this morning. Let's move on to the ground rules. Very quickly, if you don't know, please put all your microphones on mute. If you have questions, ask them in the chat. And we will have, also the polling questions. We will have quite brief presentations and hopefully plenty of room for discussion and interaction between the 2 speakers and also with all of you in the webinar. As you can see, the webinar and the slides will all be available on the VBDO website, so you can go back to that a few days after the webinar. It's in the English section of the website. And I think we should move on to the first poll question. So we go again. What do you think on this topic? Do you think that the financial sector is in fact a catalyzer for stopping biodiversity loss, for halting biodiversity loss? What is your opinions on this? I'll give you a small minute to go into that. And then after that, Doné will start his presentation. Yes. Are we there?
Almost.
Almost. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Let's see the results here. It's quite spread. Doné, can I please invite you to reflect on the results and then follow that with your presentation?
Unmute.
And please unmute. Doné, you're still on the. Can you please unmute? We can't hear you. You're still no. Doné, can you please unmute your microphone? He doesn't see.
Yeah, I can't.
Yes.
I can see you, but I can't unmute. So.
All right. Well.
No,
but now we
Yes.
heard that.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, I think for sure. I strongly agree with. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sorry?
yes, we can hear you. It's clear.
I can't hear anyone.
I can hear you now, but you're okay.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. With that, because I think the financial sector is a catalyst because many decisions are based on financial funding. So I think that will help us if the sector includes biodiversity as a criterion. People will take it. It has an effect on investments of actions of citizens and businesses. So I strongly agree. Yeah. And you expect that I do the presentation now? So
yes.
I was reflecting on the. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. The global decline in biodiversity is faster than ever in human history. An estimated 25% of world species are endangered, and mostly due to human intervention. Last year, 2019, the Intergovernmental Platform of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the IPBES, released a report on the global state of biodiversity that stated that approximately 1 million species will become extinct if no action is taken. The challenge is therefore to strengthen biodiversity in the Netherlands and in the world, so that the current trend from decline is reversed into recovery. And to turn the tide, we need to reduce our footprint. Changes are needed in all the domains of society, business and civilians. It is becoming increasingly clear that it's becoming increasingly clear that a biodiverse society requires a real cultural change, biosocial transitions, and that requires time, courage, and energy. The Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality has been working on the financial sector since 2016. And our activities are aligned along 4 transition paths. And the first one is that we support first movers with the development of metrics. The main focus for us is supporting frontrunners that are developing methods to measure the impact of biodiversity and making the rest of the financial sector aware of the importance of considering biodiversity risk. We are supporting the partnership Biodiversity Accounting Financial, with research and network. And I hope we can copy its climate sister, which was also set up in the Netherlands and who has now 70 members worldwide with a portfolio of $2 trillion. Let's hope the same success will happen for biodiversity. The second step in our transformative change is to create awareness with mainstream parties. My department actively participates in the working group on biodiversity on the Dutch or the Nederlandse Bank, which helps first movers to involve mainstream parties. We support the reports on biodiversity impacts on the financial sector and spreading this knowledge in the private and public field. We are connecting knowledge on biodiversity and natural capital to the climate agenda by offering input in the theme of nature-based solutions. The third step of our transition approach is that we invest in initiatives with a positive impact. We support the 1000 Landscapes platform and the Investor Task Force to accelerate landscape restoration. And we also work with the Netherlands Enterprise Agency to on a biodiverse place-based investments. And now we are standing at the beginning of the fourth step, and that is encouraging the change of the regulations in the system. We do not make the rules. That is the mandate of our Ministry of Finance. The activities of this transition path are done in close cooperation with that ministry, and we support them with their input for the green taxonomy in the EU, which will take on the biodiversity next year, the preparation of the launch of the task force nature-related financial disclosure, and stressing the importance of biodiversity and ecosystem services within the development of new standards and agreements, for example, the OECD and the ISO standards. The Convention on Biological Diversity will launch a new framework for nature next year. We actively participate in the preparations and also give the private financial sector an important role in that. Furthermore, Minister Rutte is giving a speech at the UN summit at the end of this month on climate change through a video message. And in this message, he stresses the importance of the role of the financial sector in halting biodiversity loss. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doné, for your contribution. Is there also a question you would like to ask to Joris from the central bank in this regard, or a dilemma that you have that he can reflect on?
Yeah, I would like to ask Joris, what's your motive for this drive to increase the importance of biodiversity in the financial sector?
Yes, is that, what is your what? Sorry, I didn't hear it clearly. What's your?
So what's your motive for
your motive? Yes.
For this drive to increase the importance of biodiversity in the financial sector?
Okay, that's a good one. And meanwhile, I would also like people from the listening in to also ask questions in the chat. We will get back to that one later as well. But first, over to Joris to react to the...
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Doné, for your presentation and the question. So I was thinking about the question, and a couple of years ago, I think it's over 4 years ago now, that one of the first researches was done within the Dutch Central Bank on risks related to climate change. And we then found out, and several reports later, we said, okay, we see these physical risks. So changing climate can lead to floods, to higher precipitation. So less often, but if precipitation happens, then there's way more water. So then also leading to floods, but also leading to droughts, especially also in the Netherlands. And so what we said, okay, we see that firms or economic activity financed by the sector also is exposed to these physical risks. And second, what we see is that, of course, the Paris Agreement set to the world to a course to less CO2 emissions. So this transition leads also to a transition in the economy, and in case financial institutions which finance all kinds of economic activity that emit a lot of CO2, this can lead to transition risks for them. And then at one point, Frank Elderson said, okay, our director, maybe this applies to other other sustainability issues as well. And that's basically what was the reason to conduct this research, whether it also holds for biodiversity related risks. There are also biodiversity related risks. I will tell a little bit more in my presentation, but yeah, what we found is that these are indeed present, and that is the main reason why we look at it, right? So we are the financial supervisor, so we want to supervise financial institutions in the sector on relevant risks. So therefore, yeah, we are taking that viewpoint, which is slightly different, I think, from the government viewpoint. But yeah, that's the main reason why we are looking into this.
All right. Thank you, Joris. It's clear. Maybe one more question also from the chat. If you can see, there's a discussion going on if the financial sector is actually, well, you pointed out, Doné, it can be a catalyzer. It has a catalyzing role as financial sector. Does it live up to its role? Is the financial sector already a role, a catalyzer? Does it already perform the catalyzer role as it should, in your opinion? Doné. Okay, here we go.
I think it does, because it's the Dutch central bank is the first in the world who made it a topic and did a study to this. So I think yes, it is, but it has to spread further. For instance, Robeco and Rabobank is now joining us with it. So, but I think yes, I think as the Netherlands we are a front runner in this.
So you're pretty happy with the Dutch financial sector, but the rest of it should actually should follow up on that one. Yeah. All right. Yes, and also some questions coming in from Joris, but maybe we first will go to your poll question, Joris, in your presentation, and then address the questions. Thank you very much, Doné, for now. We go to the second poll question. So to everyone, what do you think is biodiversity loss a relevant dimension when making sustainable investment decisions? Should we take it into account in sustainable investment decision taking? Do you agree or not agree with this? Please give your opinions in the poll to this question. Yes, and we have the results coming up. All right, that's maybe a good Kickstarter for you, Joris, to reflect on the results of this question.
Okay, so I think the public is a bit skewed, right? I mean, in a positive sense. So almost everybody that gave an answer agrees, or everybody actually. So no, yeah, I mean that I think that it's in line with at least what we and maybe sustainable in the polling question should be between brackets, because maybe the question is it a relevant dimension in investment decisions? Yeah. Because yeah, that at least is what we have concluded, that it's that's as I said before already, but I will reflect on that in my presentation a bit more, is that it seems to be a very relevant risk factor because of yeah, I would say the very importance, the big importance of nature and biodiversity for all kinds of economic activities as well. And also the increasing awareness of society, I would say, but also governments and maybe also regulators, that also negative impact on biodiversity can have issues or can entail risks for the financial sector. Thank you. Okay, I will continue with, but first let me first say that. So I'm presenting here, but our research, and it was already depicted on one of the slides of Donné, was in close collaboration with the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, which is in Dutch the Planbureau voor de Leefomgeving, it sounds a bit, maybe a bit cheesy, but I think we wouldn't have been able to produce this report without them. So they are one of the knowledge institutes in the Netherlands, also on biodiversity. So yeah, we benefited a lot from their knowledge, and then I think they benefited from us in terms of knowledge from the financial sector. So this was I think it was a unique collaboration, and I think we both learned quite a lot from each other, and very happy to have done that. So yeah, when we look at so from a central bank financial supervisor perspective, so how do we look at the relationship between the financial sector and biodiversity or nature? And then I want to start at the top of this schematic overview, and there we depicted several pictograms representing financial institutions, and then these arrows show that financial institutions are exposed to all kinds of economic activity, airlines, energy producers, other banks, and then what we said is, okay, there is a two-way relationship between these economic sectors and biodiversity. So first of all, for all kinds of activities, it is dependent on biodiversity. So one can think of a simple example. I always give the example of a apple farmer in the midst of the country, in the Betuwe, for example. And what we then see is that this apple farmer is dependent on animal pollination, and since the insect population, especially also in the Netherlands, is declining rapidly, one can think of a situation that this apple farmer is no longer it's no longer possible for him to let his apple be pollinated by these insects. So in that sense, we talk about physical risks. So a change in the physical environment, which can lead to a problem of economic activity, which then can ultimately also lead to issues or problems for financial institutions. So that's the right-hand side, the right arrow, the dependence arrow. Secondly, all kinds of economic activity has often, unfortunately, a negative impact on biodiversity and nature. I think the four main drivers of that are land use change, pollution, but also direct exploitation. So think of fishing, and also, of course, climate change, which is not only caused by economic activity, of course, or by firms, but for partly it is, right? So, and then what we say, okay, in case you can pinpoint a negative impact on nature or biodiversity directly to a firm, this can lead to reputational risks for this firm, and then also for the financial institutions behind financing these firms. So in the Netherlands, I think there's quite some attention also from NGOs on the involvement of banks in all kinds of palm oil activities, which are not necessarily all bad, I would say, but it is one of the crops that is associated with deforestation worldwide. So that's one risk, the reputational side. And then second, in case the broader economy or consumers or policy, governments are more prepared to protect nature, this leads to a so-called transition again, in which firms that have a strong negative impact on nature need to change, right? So, and in case this change is abrupt, and this is, I think, what we have seen a little bit in the nitrogen example in the Netherlands, where the Council of State ruled that it was no longer allowed to give out permits. And then what we've seen is that several sectors, for example, also the construction sector, experienced trouble because of this transition from, I would say, towards a more nature inclusive economy. So that about transition risk. So physical transition or reputational risk, and then I'll switch to the next slide, and then I will give this is the exact. So this is one of the analysis we did. We did several, but I have only time to discuss one. So what we've seen here. So we're looking at physical risks here, and it is the font is a bit too small, but hopefully you can see it. So on the left-hand side, you'll see banks, pension funds, and insurers, and the size of the width of the the arrow depicts the amount of euros within a sector. So in total, for banks, pension funds, and insurers, we're looking into we're looking at 510 billion euros, which can be related to one or more ecosystem services, of which these activities are highly or very highly dependent. So, so this is the first step, and in the second step, you see in which asset classes these financial institutions invest, basically. Or for banks, it's typically loans, and for pension funds and insurers, it's shares and bonds. And then what you'll see is we categorized all these assets to 86 business processes. So what kind of activities takes place, for example, within farming, and one can think of irrigation is one of the activities. And then using the Encore database, which linked all kinds of ecosystem services, which you see on the most right-hand side, these ecosystem services are linked to these activities. And in that way, we can ultimately link exposures of financial institutions on the left-hand side to ecosystem services. And then what we see is that especially surface water, groundwater, and climate regulation are the three, I would say, most important ecosystem services. And one can think what is important to stress is that if biodiversity is put under pressure, also these ecosystem services, which are partly dependent on the resilience of ecosystems and therefore also on biodiversity, these can also be put under pressure. So I gave the example of this animal pollination, which can be put under pressure in case the insects disappear. But this holds for many more ecosystem services. And yeah, I think I will stop here. Maybe the last thing I want to mention is that here we came to the conclusion that 510 billion euros is exposed, and this is 1/3 of the total we looked at. So this is a major portion of the total, and therefore relevant risks to us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Joris, for your excellent presentation also. We'll go into it in a minute on all the risks you described. Do you have a question for Donné for LNV from your point of view, from where you come from?
Yeah. So I was thinking, okay, how can we? How can we reinforce each other, right? In the sense that, what can, I mean, you all already briefly touched upon it, but what can a Ministry of LNV, and maybe even also together with the Ministry of Finance, of course, do to raise awareness also within the financial sector to become better aware of the risks, but also, of course, the opportunities of which we haven't, or we as DNB don't talk that much, but these are often, of course, also there. So to raise this awareness within the financial sector.
Donné.
Thank you, Joris, for your question. I think we have two roles. First is to support the sector, and that's what I'll also explained in my presentation. That we do a joint fact finding, and we try to develop methods to measure. Okay, sorry. Thank you. To measure, and secondly, I think we also make the regulation together with the European Union, and that's also a field where we have to work. And what we are now doing, we had also a motion from the not a motion, but the second chamber, our parliament asked us to pick up this topic and to work with the Ministry of Finance to get it in the regulation, and to try with the European Union within the Green Deal and the regulation around it to bring biodiversity in that regulation. And so we work with the Ministry of Finance to do that. So that's what we're doing. And also we use our authority. Yeah? So what I said, our Prime Minister is also spreading the message of be aware of the biodiversity loss and take it in account in your actions and your investments.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Maybe I was also wondering, René, it's really good to hear that LNV supports all this research and also is involved in so many initiatives on biodiversity. And also related to the financial sector. I was wondering if you look at on the impact side, on the biodiversity side, what do you think are the most important priorities? Are there any at all to achieve regarding the transformation and the systemic change that is needed? What are the most? Can you single out a few that you think are really important?
So sorry, I have a very bad connection, so I can't hear you that well.
Okay.
Can you make a summary of your question when maybe?
Yeah. Great. It is actually. What are the most important? What are your priorities on the biodiversity side when it comes on impact? That's a too brief summary, I think. What do you really? What is?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think, of course, we are now changing. We have a systematic approach. So I think we have to change our regulation and the system. So the biodiversity is included in all the decisions we are going to make. But we also have to raise support for that, because not enough people are aware to accept that regulation at this moment. And I think it's a very important thing to do. So we're now working with the other ministries. For instance, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management they are they do have a lot of activities which impact biodiversity. So it's important they do water management, they build roads, and that's also the Ministry of Inner Affairs of BZK. They are building a lot of homes, and for me it's very important that everyone knows that it can be biodiverse. So we are working with the older sectors to make them aware that if they change their approach of designing or change their activities in a biodiverse way, then they can contribute. And then the summary is more than 1 and 1 is 2, but the 1 and 1 can be 3. So that's what we're working on. We're working on that awareness, but we're also working on the knowledge for that, because there's a lot unknown. We have to do a lot of joint fact finding to create that awareness, but also the support to really change our behavior and way of acting.
Yes. Okay, that's great. And when it comes to changing behavior, is there an example that what should we really change? Or is it?
For instance, and I have a discussion with my colleague of the BZK, who is involved in the regulation for buildings, and we discovered that if we build a nature including house, and we're going to build a lot of houses coming years, 1 million, it will cost 5,000 euros more. So that's a very small part of a building, of the cost of the building. So if we change the way of looking at it, it can be very cheap to do that. But that knowledge wasn't at the ministry at that time, so we had to show them that it is possible, and that it is possible within accept reasonable costs.
Yeah.
So that's for instance an example. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's clear. So that there is more knowledge on how to build in a more biodiverse, positive way, and but it's more costly, and so also, yeah, from a financial point of view, more challenging.
That's true.
Yeah. Are those kinds of things already also yours in the part of the models that will be used by central bank supervisors, or is that maybe a step too far? Because you focus mainly on the risk side, but this is more about solutions also, I think.
Sorry, I didn't hear your last two words.
So, okay, well, in your presentation were a lot of examples on the risk side of biodiversity loss, financial and physical transition, reputation. Doné just gave you an example of a solution for just on building in a green way, but there's a challenge that is more it's more costly. And so this is, of course, so I was wondering if this type of thinking also fit the way the central bank looks at biodiversity.
No, I think typically it isn't. But what we just to start at the beginning, I mean, in the end, we are focused on financial stability. So therefore, we are looking into sound practices of banks, pension funds, insurers, all kinds of other financial institutions. So therefore, we are mainly focused on the risks. But that doesn't mean that we. I mean, I often say, okay, it is the same. There are of course many opportunities. So I can imagine. Okay, this is not. I'm not recommending anything to a bank or something, but okay, you can imagine that if this costs a bit more, as Doné just gave the example, I can imagine that a bank, for example, banks like Triodos or maybe Rabobank, or I don't know. Banks that want to really make a difference in terms of biodiversity positive impact, that they are willing to provide funding for that, right? I mean, that could be possible, and okay, that is not something we say, okay, you should do that, or we recommend you to do that. But in case you want to, as a financial institution, want to make this positive contribution, this could be a solution, right? Or this could be a way to push that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, thanks, Joris. Just saw a question coming in the chat from many coming in now, but from Johan Verburg maybe. Also, because in line with what you just said, keen to hear which private regulation bank policies imposed on clients, ESG criteria, and all are suggested. Can that be made more specific? Is that something you can go into a little bit, or is this if the question is clear? Can that?
Who?
The question from Johan to hear about the private regulation, on the bank policies, for instance, imposed on clients, and the ESG criteria for pension funds. Could that be made more specific? Yeah, maybe the question. Could you maybe make the question a little bit more specific than Johan? Then we could go into this one.
I can comment quickly if you want.
Yeah. All right.
I'm currently rewriting Rabobank's biodiversity policy. So, make it specific, make it concrete. What should a bank like Rabobank and my peers write in their biodiversity policies? We can we can impose that on a range of clients as from the 1st of January, and we seem to be circling around it a little bit too much. If we can make things specific, then maybe things will speed up.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. That's clear then, Johan. Maybe it's this is one challenging question, and maybe too challenging to answer in the next 4 minutes that we have left. But maybe something that you could get back to, talk about later after this webinar with yours or someone from who could help you out with that. Is there lots of questions actually going on, but I'm just looking at the time. We only have 3 minutes left. So, well, if questions can be answered through the chat, I would suggest that people who can will do that. And otherwise, for the webinar itself, I would like to first thank very much Doné and Joris for your contributions in the presentations and also in the discussions. And I would like to invite Romy to wrap up this session and for today. Please, Romy, if you are there.
Yeah, I'm here, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. Maybe first to start with Johan's question, because I think we should reflect on it a little bit. But something that we as IUCN Netherlands often see is that policy is very important, but also the implementation of that policy and making that very effective and smart is sometimes lacking. So I'll now move up to the wrap up. So with this session, we've come to an end of 3 webinars about biodiversity in the financial sector, together with VBDO. To me, it almost feels like a routine doing this every Thursday, although I'm not feeling very well. So as was pointed out by Doné and others along the course of these webinars, we are losing species at an alarming rate. So for those of you that haven't seen the Living Planet report of WWF that was released last week, it showed that, basically nearly 70% decrease in population sizes of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish. So basically the species we have a lot of data about between now and 1970. To me, the easiest way to explain that is if you look at mammal biomass. Today, 60% is livestock, 36% are us, humans, and only 4% are all of your elephants, monkeys, and whatever wild animals are still out there. As we know, healthy societies and resilient economies and thriving business rely on nature. We believe that the postponed meeting of the CBD in Kunming, that is hopefully taking place in January of next year, will be really the last moment to agree on effective measures to reverse nature loss in this decade and to bend the curve of biodiversity decline. As we've learned over the course of these webinars, the realization of the new Aichi targets will only be possible by concerted action by all relevant stakeholders. This requires mainstreaming of physical and transition risks of biodiversity loss by financial institutions. And I think what I found very interesting from this webinar, when I joined IUCN Netherlands 7 years ago, we would often hear, well, we can't measure it and we're not sure. I think that this webinar and also last week when the work of ASN Bank was presented shows that it is possible for financial institutions to measure their impact on biodiversity today. So today we focused on the role that governmental actors and supervisory authorities can play. I think this is a bit of a two-way street. So we learned that they can help us understand the complex relationship between nature and finance. They can support new ideas to fruition and create awareness. On the other side, they also rely on non-state actors to realize their own goal. And lastly, during the course of this webinar, we spoke about the need of effective regulation and cooperation between different state agencies. At IUCN Netherlands, we believe that financial institutions should make every effort to take their responsibility and contribute to the protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems via their financing activities and investments. At IUCN Netherlands, we have been working with the financial sector for a number of years in two ways. On the one hand, we are developing investable landscape programs to bridge the gap between landscape initiatives and the finance sector. And on the other hand, we're engaging with investors to improve their impact on nature. And we're also working to inform international tool development and policy. Based on our track record, and as you can see on the slide that's up there now, is that the Ministry of LNV has asked us, together with NVO Netherlands, to collect and promote actions by Dutch non-state actors towards the CBD, such as financial institutions. So if you think you have a pledge to make towards our Dutch contribution towards the CBD, please look at the website that's mentioned on screen. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email or to connect via VBDO. And with that said, I want to thank Jacqueline, of course, and the team at VBDO for organizing these excellent webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Romy, and thank you also for this great summary of all that we did last 3 weeks, and also of this webinar. That was great to hear. Thank you again, the people in the webinar who participated actively in the chat. I hope most of your questions have been answered, and if not, we can try to accommodate that if there are any questions that we could help out with. And of course, lastly, thank also to Joris and to Donné for participating here, and thanks to Romy also for our final summary. So, well, with this, I would like to to close this webinar, and we'll wish you all a great day today. Thanks very much.